Hello and welcome. We all think about getting older, but what does that actually mean for our bodies? Today, in this explainer, we're going to decode the science of what's called normal aging. We're moving past all the myths to really understand what's going on under the hood as the years go by.
And really, it all comes down to this one huge question. Is aging just a fixed destiny, something that's written into our genetic code from day one? Or is it more of a story that we actually get to help write ourselves through the choices we make? That's the big mystery we're going to tackle.
So, where do we even begin? Well, we start with the basic aging equation. Let's break down the fundamental pieces that determine how we age.
Now, you might think it's all in our genes, right? But check this out. A landmark study of Danish twins found something absolutely startling. Our DNA? Turns out it only accounts for about a quarter, just 25% of the difference in how long people live. A massive 50%, a full half, comes down to our environment and our lifestyle. That's a game changer. It means that choices we make day in and day out matter way more than the genetic blueprint we were born with.
Okay, so if our choices have such a massive impact, how does aging actually work on a biological level? Well, it's not really about new diseases just popping up out of nowhere. It's more about a gradual change in our body's ability to handle stress. And there's a key concept for this. It's called homeostasis.
But to get that, first we have to appreciate something called homeostasis. When we're young, our bodies are just masters of balance. They're constantly keeping our temperature, our blood pressure, our oxygen levels, everything just right. The best analogy? It's like a perfectly calibrated thermostat, maintaining this wide, stable, comfortable zone where everything just works. So, homeostasis is what happens as we get older. That wide, stable zone, it slowly starts to narrow. Our safety buffer for dealing with challenges, like an infection, a heat wave, or even just skipping a meal, it gets smaller and smaller. I want you to picture a tightrope walker. When they're young, that rope is as wide as a sidewalk. But with age, that rope gets progressively narrower. It takes way more effort just to stay balanced, and there is so much less room for error.
This whole shrinking buffer thing leads to a really powerful metaphor that doctors use. They call it the family of precipices. The idea is that as our internal reserves get used up, we start living closer and closer to several different kinds of cliffs.
And here's what that looks like in the real world. For a younger person, a urinary tract infection is, it's an annoyance, right? But for an older person with that much smaller safety buffer, that exact same UTI, or a mild heart attack, or a minor stomach bleed, that can be the one little thing that pushes them over the edge into a state of confusion, which is called delirium. You see? The paths are different, but they can all lead to the exact same cliff.
So this shrinking safety buffer, what does it actually feel like in our day-to-day lives? All right, let's take a quick tour through 3 key body systems to see this whole idea of homeostasis in action.
Let's start with our senses. The gradual changes here are a perfect example of normal aging. It's not some sudden failure. It's just a slow shift in how we perceive everything around us, almost like someone is slowly turning down the lights and the volume on the world. You want to make that real? Get this. Because the lens of our eye naturally yellows over time, a typical 60-year-old needs 3 times the amount of ambient light to read as a 20-year-old. All of a sudden, that reading lamp isn't just a nice-to-have, it's an absolute necessity.
And it's not just our vision, that lens in our eye, it also gets stiffer. That's why so many of us start needing reading glasses in our 40s. It has a name. It's called presbyopia. At the same time, hearing high-frequency sounds gets a lot harder, which makes trying to have a conversation in a noisy restaurant a real challenge. Even our sense of smell can start to decline, which, believe it or not, can make food seem less flavorful and even affect our appetite.
Okay, next up, let's look at the heart and our blood vessels. The story here isn't one of failure at all, but of changing performance. The cardiovascular system is still an incredibly powerful pump, but it just loses some of that youthful flexibility and responsiveness, especially when it's put under stress.
This quote, it just sums it up perfectly. At rest, an older heart can function remarkably well, no problem. But when you challenge it, with exercise or an illness or stress, its reserves are smaller. It just has less capacity to ramp up, and that's what makes it more vulnerable.
And there's a great way to actually see this. It's with this really simple formula for your maximum heart rate. It's roughly 220 minus your age. It's a clear, linear, predictable decline. Your heart isn't getting weak, its peak performance range is just narrowing a little bit as the decades pass.
And finally, let's talk about the brain. You know, there's a lot of fear around cognitive aging, but the real story is one of incredible adaptation. So while, yes, some changes do happen, the brain is constantly remodeling itself to compensate, even late in life. It's pretty amazing.
So what's actually going on in there? Well, we might see a slight decrease in brain volume, and yeah, we can lose some of the connections between brain cells. Our processing speed can slow down. You know, that tip of the tongue feeling? But, and this is the amazing part, the brain fights back. It actually recruits other neural networks to help out with a task, creating these clever cognitive workarounds to maintain function. It's a remarkable display of what's called lifelong plasticity.
Okay, so we've looked at the biology. Now let's zoom back out and answer the big so what question. Knowing all of this, how can we redefine our final chapters and really think about aging on our own terms?
The goal becomes what researchers call successful aging. And look, this isn't about avoiding aging, it's about navigating it well. It's defined by keeping up high physical and mental function, minimizing disease, and, just as importantly, staying actively engaged with life and the world. It shifts the entire narrative from one of inevitable decline to one of sustained potential.
And successful aging, this isn't just some hopeful idea, it's a statistical reality. Just take a look at this data for an 85-year-old man. So while the average, the median life expectancy is another 4.7 years, there is huge variability. The top 25% will live for nearly 8 more years, while the bottom quarter will live just over 2. The takeaway here is crystal clear. At the exact same chronological age, people are on vastly different biological tracks.
And this all leads to a classic saying in geriatrics that might just be the most important takeaway from this entire discussion. It goes, when you have seen one 85-year-old, you have seen one 85-year-old. As we get older, we don't become more alike, we become profoundly more different. Our unique mix of genetics, life experiences, and choices makes each person's journey incredibly unique.
And so we end right back where we began. If our genes are only a small part of the story, and our choices and environment are the main authors, well, then the power to shape our own aging process is so much greater than we might think. The question then isn't what aging will do to you, but what you will do with your aging.